Welcome. It's Bruce Scholl here with Unscrew the News, and I have a fantastic guest reappearing in the what are we? We're so close to the end of 2025. This is exciting, and I can't believe how fast time has been flying. But I appreciate you being here. Thank you very much for tuning in to Unscrew the News. And if you are watching, make sure to share this out, get more eyeballs on this information. We need to wake up more people, and I appreciate you being here. God bless you all. Um, I want to say, I want to start off by saying thank you before we get started here. Thank you to the, especially the last 5 years. They really have, I guess, refined and honed what Unscrew the News has become. And you're a big part of that. So thank you very much. Make sure to share this out. Get it out to your friends, your families. We are just trying to wake up the world to what is happening. And we're going to get into unscrewing some news here. So I thank you so much for participating in the freedom of, especially of Alberta. That is a big, big part of what we are working towards today. But I brought this guest on again because of what is going on market wise. Silver is, I would say, definitely breaking out. I mean, we have seen increases in the last 6 months of Canadian wise about $50. $50 moving about $50 per ounce in the last 6 months. It's absolutely insane. Is it $50? Yeah, it's almost $50 an ounce. It's absolutely insane that I'm actually saying that. I've been collecting this stuff for 10 years now. And anyway, so stuff is happening in the silver market. I'm watching all kinds of things happening, and I'm sure you are as well. But I reached out to David Skarica. I had him on before, and he comes to us as an author and an investor, a contrarian investor. I got to throw that in there as well. But author of the Mega Returns, Profit from Maximum Pessimism, and he runs a investment newsletter, profitfrompessimism.com. And I reached out to him because he is kindred spirit, really. Canadian born, and he lives now in somewhere in Bermuda. A life that I would love to live. But I brought him on because, he has some great insight. Love to hear what he has to say. And we're going to talk about Alberta independence as well, because in his heart, I think he's Canadian at heart, even though he's living on the sandy beaches of Bermuda. So I want to welcome David Skarica. Thank you very much for joining me, sir. It's a pleasure to have you.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's actually, I live in the Bahamas, not Bermuda.
Oh, sorry, Bahamas. I apologize.
I get that all the time. I guess because you have all these BE countries here, Barbados, Bermuda, Bahamas. I guess it's a Kokomo song by the Beach Boys. But yeah. I live in the Bahamas. So Bermuda actually is a very temperate. It's not very warm there. If you actually look at it on the map, it's about where North Carolina is. So yeah, I live in the Bahamas. Of course, it was an English Commonwealth. And so it's the same language. There's no income tax here. That's why a lot of expats tend to live here, etc. So, and I think in my last show, I don't have my camera tilted this way this time, but I have a F Trudeau flag.
Yeah, you did the last time.
You talk about being Canadian heart. I have the old Canadian flag, pre 1965.
Oh, nice.
Should still be the flag, but
hey, we're going to create our own flag. There's obviously because we're going to have a blank slate when it comes to Alberta and in our separation, where we've obviously got to talk about our own flag. So yeah, talk about flag talks for sure. We've got to discuss what's going on with the flag.
Yeah. So, but I think from what we were talking about, we'll get into that in a second. We're going to talk about kind of like the silver and gold precious metal markets, like you said, which are on fire. Like silver is over 75. Actually, it means in Canadian terms, it's like $100 an ounce Canadian, which is incredible.
It is. I'm going to share this right now here with us, David. This is current. This is 103.61 per ounce Canadian, and just today, so it went up $5.24 or whatever the case is. But I mean, that is a massive move. Like I said, I've been doing this for a little over 10 years, stacking some silver, and it's just incredible that it's gone up that quickly.
Well, and I think we have to ask yourself, like, why is this happening? I think there is a bit of a, okay, there's three things in my opinion. Number one is technical, like before we get into the fundamental reasons, is that if you go look back at a silver chart going back 50 years,
Yeah.
You'll see that 1980 that's when the Hunt brothers cornered the market and the shoe spiked to 50. And then it went back to 50 in 2011. And then it sold off that. So you had this massive double top from 1980 to 2011. So basically 40-year period where you had this double top, or sorry, 30-year period. And then you've had now this breakout. So essentially you're breaking out of a 45-year kind of base or double top, where silver did get all the way down to 3 back in the 90s. And, now it's, like I said, now it's 75. So I knew that kind of like, and I wrote this, and I talked about this in my publication, that I think when we break that 50, we're going to have a huge move. So it went above 50, then had a little pullback back towards the low 50s, which was kind of like you broke the resistance, and then resistance became support, and now it's completely taken over. So then that's the first one. Number two, I do think there's something going on, like, for example, Japanese bond yields, and I'll explain why I think this is affecting gold and silver, are up to like almost 20-year highs on the 10-year bond, and I think like almost all-time highs, because the 30-year bond in Japan wasn't issued until like the 90s. So almost all-time highs. And of course, Japan has a lot more debt than it had back in, say, the 90s and 2000s. Now, it's 260% of GDP. It's the most indebted country in the world. And I think there's a worry that there could be kind of like bond vigilantes, they're called. They're the people that will push up interest rates because they think governments are being fiscally too irresponsible. And I think there's a worry that this could spread all over the Western world. And Japan's not in the crisis mode yet, but if they do, because Japan, believe it or not, even though I think it's only the 4th or 5th largest economy, has the 2nd largest bond market because they have so much debt, right? So as a percentage of GDP. And so anyhow,
296% from this.
96%. And I think one of the things, just quickly before I get, again, gold and silver aspect, that pushed it, and I think this is going to happen in Canada, this is going to happen in the US, it's going to happen in all these countries, was that their last debt under the new prime minister in Japan, or their last budget, did the same thing Japan's been doing for 30 plus years. Oh, we're going to spend money, we're going to borrow money, it doesn't matter if it's conservatives, liberals, socialists in Japan, and then we're going to do a stimulus, and then these rates really spiked. And it was almost like the market said, you're at 300% of GDP, enough is enough. Now, what you have to understand is the Japanese central bank owns about half of that. So it's kind of like 150% in terms of, because in terms of like the interest payment, a lot of it, and the same thing goes on in the US after the QE, is the interest gets paid, but the interest gets paid to the central bank, who sends it right back to the treasury. So it's like not like they're paying that entire 300% to investors, which is why rates can go a little bit higher without them becoming insolvent. But again, I think this is a feeling that this could start all over the Western world. And I think one reason Japan was able to get away with this to a more extreme level than other countries is, it has a very docile population. They're all, the Japanese tend to be very loyal.
Very complicit,
Complicit. They don't have a lot of immigration. So, and it's a very stable society. So, and all their debt is domestically owned. Like, they don't have US dollar-based debt. They don't have a lot of foreigners owning the debt. It's almost all domestically owned. So that was able to suppress those interest rates for a long time. And so I think that if that spreads, I think gold and silver are almost anticipating this. And I think also, too, a lot of things, we're becoming, the kind of whole globalization trade is over. And countries are becoming more internalized, or
nationalistic,
nationalistic, jingoistic, what do you want to say it? And Trump kind of got the ball rolling on that. And of course, then that means that foreign central banks, who own about 25% of US debt, which I think was 45% at the top, aren't really buying US treasuries anymore. They're buying gold and silver instead. So that's there's that central bank trade part of it as well. And so that's kind of going on as well. So I think it's basically, in a nutshell, these things I try to explain, it's worries over there could be a potential debt crisis. And the third one is speculation. You got the momentum traders coming on. You got that double top being broken. You got the mem stock type traders coming on. That's why I think you should be worried maybe into the new year. Then you probably have a lot of portfolio painting. People want to act like in the professional industry that they own silver because it's been the best performing asset over this year. So I think you have a lot of that as well. And of course, there's this whole thing of manipulation. And you probably, I guess this is number 4, you probably have a lot of short covering going on as well, because silver is a tight market. I think there are problems with being able to get physical supply, right? And people are probably scrambling, pushing the price up because they need to pay whatever they get to get that physical supply. And, I think what this is going to lead to, even whenever some kind of correction comes, though, is, and Samsung's already done this with 2 companies, which we were talking about off air. We talked about one of them, and then actually the other one is one of them is Silverstorm. The other one is actually Great Panther Mining as well. And Samsung is essentially like invested in these companies and giving these companies loans in exchange for the supply of silver. So I think that things that are needed, that there are deficits in: uranium, silver, platinum, lithium. I think you may see more deals like this where big companies. Tesla needs a lot of batteries, which is lithium, right? So does Nvidia needs a lot of silver for their chips. So you may see more of this going forward. And in terms of like manipulation or people thinking the central banks would come and squash it, I really don't know, because I think, again, with this deglobalization trade, this nationalization trade, I think people were saying the Indian central bank was buying silver in reserves, not just gold, recently.
Right.
I think that that suppression trade is kind of done, because that suppression trade was always there to kind of prop up the US dollar as a reserve currency. But if you have all these countries all over the world fed up with tariffs, fed up with maybe the way the US is behaving, and economically, they're not going to really care about suppressing the price of gold and silver anymore.
Interesting. So one of the other things, and just touching on the Samsung part of it, you mentioned technical. The industrial part of silver is a big part as well, right? Because it's so much is being utilized. So to add on to the Samsung discussion is that they've got this new battery coming out. Is that right? Where they're going to be using a ton more silver, so they really needed to shore up, I guess, their supply, right?
Yeah, from everything I've read, is this new battery is almost like more silver based than it is lithium based, right? So yeah, they're going to be using a ton of silver for that as well, right? So, and I think you're going to see. Okay, and this is kind of getting a little off topic, but there was a stock when we talked about my book in my last interview, and there was a stock I talked in my book called EOS Energy, and they actually use zinc battery, right? Technology. And part of the reason they're doing this is that there is a shortage of lithium, and China controls most of the supply. So I think you're going to see this kind of thing. We're trying not just, they're going to try to get into alternative battery sources, because it's not just EVs. It's like you need it for battery storage. And now with the advent of AI and AI using so much energy, you're going to want to store energy to continue to, allow that to be used for the development of AI. And you're not going to have it as much to store. You're not going to be able to store just with lithium ion batteries. You're going to have to use silver based, zinc based, etc. So there's that part of it. And if you go look in downturns economically, like the 2008 crash or 2020, when everything crashed for a little while because of the global shutdown because of COVID, silver tends to drop a lot more than gold, because of those industrial uses, because it is more economically sensitive. So it's still a monetary metal, but it does have a little more economic sensitivity than gold. So as well. But another thing I'd like to just talk about quickly is from a technical standpoint as well, there's something which we talked quickly about off air as well, called the gold to silver ratio. And traditionally it trades around 60 to 71, meaning like 1 ounce of gold trades 60 times an ounce of silver. And when it gets cheap, it's over 85 to 1. A couple times in history, which only actually happened within the last 5 years, 2020 and COVID, and earlier this year, it's gone over 100 to 1, meaning silver is cheap compared to gold, and both times silver ran up. And so right now it's 62 to 1. And I would say anything under 50, under 45 to 1 is when silver gets more expensive. But 60, 65, that's about right. And that's 62 before today. Probably be around 60 today after today's move, but that's right around the median. So right now, silver is not even, it's more like playing catch up, right? Than anything else.
So what you're saying is that because I'm not your investment advisor, I'm not anybody's investment advisor, but you're saying that silver is still pretty cheap, is what you're saying. It's not expensive at this point.
I think there is some frothiness short term in the market, but
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I just look at, which is that I know doing junior mining investing, even though I'm 48, I started really young, so for 30 years since my teens, right? I would say like what usually ends these gold and silver moves is you have a huge move in the juniors, the Vancouver, penny stock type stocks, and we're not really seeing that. They've done well, they've ticked up now, but they're coming off extremely depressed levels.
Yeah.
And I would say when you get a move into those, and this happened right before the 1987 crash, this happened in 96, 97, right before Bre-X ended up being a fraud. This happened in 07, 08, right before financial crisis, and gold and silver got whacked really bad. I would say that you would really have to see these junior market really get frothy. And I just use a really simple indicator. There's a CDNX indice, which you can look at, right? And by the way, this index is still like 70% off its 2007 high, right? So think what all other markets, especially stock markets, have done since the 09 bottom. And that index is still 70% off its high. But I just look for a lot of juniors that are trading at multi-dollars. Like I remember stocks I bought at 50 cents or whatever back in 96. That's when I said I started when I was 18, 19. And I remember these stocks going to $4. One went to almost $20, all this sort of thing. And most of the penny stocks that I own now are still penny stocks. So when I start seeing stocks like, that I bought at 20 cents or even new or that were 20, 30 cent stocks, and now they're $3, $4, $5, and there's dozens or hundreds of them, then I kind of know that's when the bubble's over. And we're nowhere near that right now.
I see. I'm going to bring up your page here just for people. Gold continues to surge to new highs as stocks fall. The threat of a global trade war is here, and you need to protect your savings. Stop trying to time the market and start buying today. NuggetStacker.com. To see, this is what I'm assuming this is what you spend a bunch of your time doing. Obviously, you've got interviews here. This is profit from pessimism.com.
Yeah, that's it right there.
Yeah.
The last post is actually talking about the silver breakout. So
yeah, and this is just I'm going to bring it up here. Let's just take a look.
I'm actually, after we do this interview, I'm going to do a members update.
Oh, okay.
And I'm doing something very cool on my YouTube page. This is for free. This is free. I did one interview a few months ago with a subscriber I have from England, and then I did another one from a subscriber I have from Texas, and that was the interview I did that Christmas Eve, and I'm going to post that. So I also talk about the interactiveness of because I really talk. I rather have a few dozen really hardcore subscribers that I interact with than have 1,000 subscribers I don't know who they are, right? So, and those tend to be more quality subscribers and longer term subscribers. So anyhow, so this is a cool series I'm doing where I'm interviewing subscribers, and some of my subscribers like to, like stocks like Regency. They like to speculate in juniors. Some of the subscribers like I trade options. Well, like to trade options. Some subscribers I do some shorting and hedging, like to short. Some subscribers I have these long-term dividend kind of safety companies like to buy stuff like that. So I kind of do all these things. And then, like I said, right now we actually have a group chat where we're actually, because I do think the stock market is a bubble and will end at some point. And so we were just, this group chat was set up for actually shorting ideas. And even with the market near all-time highs, we were short stuff like CarMax and which collapsed. And actually some of our shorts did very, very, very well. And even in this kind of up market, and then I did longs too. I don't know if you know American Eagle. It's a clothing company. They did the thing with Cindy Sweeney. So I thought that campaign.
Well, they have nice jeans.
Yeah, we have great jeans, right? And anyhow, and so
you did well with that one.
Yeah, we bought the stock, and I bought options when the stock was 13. The stock is 26 now. So. I don't want to come off as sexist, but I always say that's the first time a good-looking woman has ever made me money instead of costing me money.
Nice.
Sorry, ladies.
truth. It's we're being honest here. All right. So as far as silver is concerned, so right now, and again, I'm speaking, mostly to the Canadians, but we're at about $104, just below $104 per ounce. I don't think it's a top, but I want your opinion on that.
Well, here's what I think is going to happen ultimately. The way, because you always have to be flexible,
Mm,
is I always hope for the trade like the 70s or the trade that happens where the market goes down and then silver and gold and silver become the hedge, right? And people are getting out of stocks and risk assets and into gold
yeah,
and silver. But it looks to me this is going to be a bit like 07, 08, where gold, silver, and other commodities went up with the stock market and then fell with them when the market happened. But here's what I think comes out of that is that gold and silver from 09 to 2011
yeah.
were the first assets to rebound, right? So I
Mhm.
think whatever they top out at, and if the stock market does roll over, etc., they will get whacked. But when the Federal Reserve has to turn around, and because maybe there is a sovereign debt crisis, which I mentioned earlier, so
Mhm.
the Federal Reserve has to start printing money, cutting rates, try to bail out the system.
Yeah.
Gold and silver will be the first out of that. So I don't think this, even with this move, if this is just a speculation move, I don't think this is quite the top yet. Now, we could see a big pullback here. Like, I mean, silver could pull back $10 very easily.
100%,
Yeah, yeah,
100%.
yeah.
It could easy,
Yeah,
easy,
yeah.
easy.
But I think it will probably top with the market, get whacked with the market, and then when we get into that kind of panic trade, and I mean panic not by panic selling, I mean panic trade that the Fed will be panicked and have to cut rates and print money. Then I think you get the real wave up in gold and silver where they become the hedges of
Yes.
currency devaluation, etc. And by the way, I don't know if you ever know who Ray Dalio is,
No.
right? He managed the largest hedge fund in the world. And Dalio, he's retired now, but he's been recently, he's very long gold, right? I don't know what his feelings are in silver, but he said that this isn't a trade. This is like a currency revaluation. And it's like the fiat currencies of the world being devalued against gold and silver because of all the debt all these countries have racked up. So that's also the way you have to look at it. It's like, okay, I speculate in junior miners, I speculate in the equities, but this is not really a trade. This is more like a long-term currency devaluation. And the one thing too
Right.
is using those inflation-adjusted highs in 1980, I think is kind of useless because when you take it, like if you go say adjust gold price for like what the M1 or M2, these are like how much money is in the system,
Yeah.
or like the amount of debt out there. Like you're talking gold has to be at $40,000 an ounce or something insane, right? So
Mm.
to readjust for that. So I think people have to come to grips with that. Remember the 70s too was like this inflation trade, where they got off the gold standard and all this sort of thing. But right now we have debt to GDP in the US north of 120%. In Canada, on the federal level, it's not as bad, but if you include all the provinces, Canada's about 100% of GDP too, provincial plus, federal debt. So, France, UK, Spain, they're all the same as well. So even Germany is running huge deficits right now, and they were always kind of like fiscally responsible. So, I think that's what we're seeing is this flight away from the fiat currencies because there's no way that any of these countries can get out of this debt. And we've seen what's happening in places like Argentina or Venezuela, except for to print their way out. Now, I'm not saying we're going to have that kind of hyperinflation, but I could see how inflation getting well into the double digits and maybe even being 20, 30%. They won't report that. They'll probably report it like half of that, but I think that's what could definitely happen, right? Because that's the only way you're getting out of this. Because look, in the welfare state, everyone wants the free stuff, right? And we've seen this with the dental plan in Canada, right?
Yeah.
Polar Bear couldn't get rid of it even if he won, right? Because now that has become ingrained and so many people are using it. So they want their health care, they want their welfare, they want their free stuff. And governments aren't going to cut that. But what they're going to do is they're just going to print money, and that's what they're going to do. Now, I would love if we could have more Melees like the Argentinian, the president, but I just don't see like he was able to do that because Argentina had been such a basket case for so long. Yeah. And if corruption is top of the fiscal problems, people had just had enough and said, yeah, take the chainsaw out.
What about
right? So,
what about El Salvador? What are your? Do you understand what's going
well,
on there?
he's
Because
kind of a
he's turned it around,
libertarian.
right?
He's kind of a libertarian, but see, the thing with some of those countries, they don't run huge deficits
I
because
see.
they don't really have access to the international markets. Like they have very
Hmm.
low credit scores, and I don't know, I don't know about El Salvador. One issue I've always had with him is I wish he would have just been loading up on gold and silver rather than Bitcoin, right?
Bitcoin, yeah.
Is even though he's done very well in the Bitcoin, I think they're in a 30 or 40,000. Of course, Bitcoin's about 80 to 90,000 now. The
Hmm.
issue I think he's going to have is I think Bitcoin is a risk, and I've said this many times in my publication. I think Bitcoin is a risk on trade. That
Hmm.
Bitcoin has a much higher correlation. I think it's 95% with the Nasdaq than it does, say as a hedge against the U.S. dollar or trading with gold and silver, right?
Mm.
And what's interesting, by the way, if you are a bear on the stock market, is that this happened in 2021 where the market held up into the end of 2021, but Bitcoin had a large correction in the fourth quarter, and it's done the
Right.
same thing this year, right? So that's an
Yeah.
interesting thing to watch going into 2026. But anyhow, I think that's the problem he's going to run into, that if, say, the NASDAQ were to go down 50% or 40%, and the
Yeah.
S&P 40%, Bitcoin is probably going to go to 30,000. Because the last two major corrections of Bitcoin in 2018 and 2022, when there were actually bear markets in the stock market, Bitcoin went down 75% on
Mm.
about 20 to 25% corrections in the S&P. So
Hmm.
I think that's the problem he's going to have. But and also he did the thing where he basically arrested all the thugs. But I'm not against that, even being a libertarian, because those countries are just the gangs and violent. My dad second wife was from Honduras, and my stepbrother is from Honduras,
Okay.
right? And those his my dad actually he's actually technically kind of like my cousin or nephew, but like my dad adopted him because his father got murdered because gang violence in Honduras is out of control.
Sure.
So I understand why he did that. But yeah, in terms of fiscally, I would assume that fiscally he's pretty responsible. I haven't really looked into El Salvador. I was more interested in what's happening into Argentina. And
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
the way, if there is a big decline in asset markets, and these Argentinian stocks are fantastic companies. They pay high dividends. They're well run. You know why? Because they had to operate in a basket case economy for
Yeah.
30 years. So they're very efficient. And I think because of Argentina's reforms, they'll kind of be like the first country out. What's kind of funny is Argentina was kind of ahead of the curve, being a basket case, having hyperinflation, having all these problems. And now they're ahead of a curve in terms of
Turn
cutting
around.
spending and
Yeah.
kind of turning it around, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right. I'm just going to quickly show your book here. 1 second. I've got it. I've got it listed on my website, so you can go to unscrewthenews.com, go to books and businesses we like, and you'll see it right here, and it'll go right to your
There's one thing
certified.
I'd like to say too about that gold
Yeah.
and silver trade, about if we see a big decline and gold and silver do get whacked with the markets and then coming out of it. But here's the thing, they're going to hold up a lot better. So like right now, like the crypto boys are not doing that well. Bitcoin is down
Sure.
this year. I said the advent of the ETFs was very negative for Bitcoin because it brought in weak hands who will be more likely to sell in a downturn rather than hodlers. And this happened, by the way, in gold and silver when the ETFs were brought in the mid 2000s, especially the equity ETFs. What happened is every downturn, people would just bail, and then the ETFs would sell all the stocks, right? But what I'm trying to say is this, though: if you've got like gold and silver holding up relatively well, and Bitcoin's 70-75% off its highs, I think that gold and precious metals will attract that money, right?
Mhm.
I especially with it doing well. And I think one reason, even though we're looking at silver, but like say the investment community universe en masse isn't, is that the stock market's at all-time highs, blah blah blah. People are still very complacent. AI is going crazy. So
Right.
I think like once you get an asset market decline, and this happened in the mid 2000s when gold and silver began to move, it attracted a lot of money because it was like, well, the NASDAQ just went down. This is the way people thought was the NASDAQ was down 80% during that bear market. People didn't even want to look at tech stocks or .coms anymore.
Right.
And so gold and silver kind of became a play. And I think that will happen again. And like I said, that's what's really crazy about what's happening now, man, is we're seeing these moves without it like really
Without
trading like a
with
huge
a
amount.
Right. Without a crash or without a pullback on the market is what you're saying. Everything's going
or
up.
just like even attracting a lot of
Yeah.
like institutional money. Like it's just the same players are in, etc. Like you go look at the volume on the GDX. It's the
Yeah.
same as it was in July when the GDX is 50. Now it's 90, right?
Mm.
So obviously the dollar volume goes up because you're
Mm.
trading, but the actual just volume shares, it
Yeah.
has not budged at all.
So just for people watching that may not be, following gold and silver as much as you and I might be concerned about it. Traditionally, people when they get concerned about the market, when they get concerned about the debt in a country, they go to something like gold and silver because it is traditionally something that is more stable. Is that not usually what happens?
Yeah, like for example, if you had owned gold and silver in Argentina,
Yeah.
okay, obviously gold and silver. Say Argentina's like they've had major crisis since the late 80s, but let's take like the 2002, 2001, 2002 crisis in Argentina. So let's say you had bought in gold and silver in the late 90s. So gold has gone from 250, to 4,500, in that time frame. So you've done great even in
Yeah.
US dollar terms. Actually, it's gotten so good that going back to the early 70s and the early 2000s, those like a 25 and a 55-year time frame, gold has now outperformed the S&P in each time frame, right?
Mm-hmm.
So so if you've done well then, but imagine in Argentina how well you've done when the currency has lost 99% of its value against the US dollar.
Right.
So in Argentina peso terms, you've even more than outpaced way than in the hyperinflation. So that's what people tend to do. I think in Turkey, people were buying gold and silver because they had a hyperinflation too in the last 10, 15 years. So that's what people kind of do. They accumulate gold and silver because that becomes a hedge. And if you're in a dysfunctional economy, fiat current economy, where you cannot spend anymore, right?
Yeah.
And you can't in terms of there's this thing people have seen. My dad said this when he went to Mexico in the 80s on vacation, that they would just change the prices every day on the menu of the restaurant. Right.
Yeah.
So, but if you come in there with a gold coin, they'll be like, okay, here's a gold coin, blah, blah, blah. Well, you'll get whatever you want for it. So that you
it's
can
different.
use it. Yeah. You can use it from that standpoint. One issue with Bitcoin too, is if the lights go off,
Yes.
what are you going to do?
You have no Bitcoin.
You have no Bitcoin. Those Bitcoin exchanges get hacked all the time. You can leave your gold and silver at a bank in the safety deposit box. You can, arm yourself to the teeth and have it at home. You can do all these things for it. And of course, it's very portable because, carrying around $10,000 and $100 bills is kind of, is a little difficult. But now with gold, 2 ounces of gold is
2 ounces of gold. Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty easy to carry around, So anyhow, that's why people use it, because it keeps your basically your spending.
It holds your value, right?
Your value and that sort of thing. And just look at everything. I know, I'm sure, okay, I live in the Bahamas, everything's expensive. We import everything. But even here, I look at what a steak, because we don't have any local meat. You have to import that. Yeah. I look at what a steak cost here 20 years ago when I moved here and what it costs now.
Yeah.
It's more than doubled easy, right? Well, gold in the same time frame has gone from about 600 to 4,500, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so I just for fun, I want to compare your steak prices. Do you know what a ribeye costs in Bahamas?
Okay, I got these. I didn't get a ribeye, but I got two really nice, almost like top of the end fillets.
Yeah.
Right. And they're about $50 US.
$50 each, or
no,
$50 for the
two.
It
was smaller fillets. It came $50 in a thing. So about $50. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you were talking about inflation and how it's not, it's not hyperinflation. Well, Canada, and I'm sure you're still paying attention to what's going on in Canada. But
of course, my dad lives.
Man, the food prices are insane, and even here in Alberta, where we raise a lot of cattle, the meat prices are insane. I just went to the superstore Loblaws, and I was taking pictures because I was blown away with how expensive it is. It's not the greatest beef, 2 ribeyes were $70
It was
Canadian.
about 50. It's about the same.
Yeah, it's about the same as what you were paying. And,
Yeah.
uh, and we're not importing it. We're not putting it on a ship and sending it over to the superstore. But
Yeah, yeah.
the prices
Yeah,
are
and
crazy.
remember when that comes on the ship, you're paying for the cost of refrigeration on that ship. You're paying for the diesel. It takes like
Of
all these
course.
sorts of things, right?
And all the
Yeah,
staff.
because one thing I can get pretty cheap here, but even that's gone up a lot. Like I can get stone crab or lobster here,
Yeah.
from the local guys. But even
Yeah.
stone crab, I used to buy it for $11 a pound. It's
Yeah.
like $16, $17 a pound now.
Well, they
So
still have to pay gasoline prices. So, I
gasoline
mean, to
price,
go out there, yeah.
and then the labor prices go up because guess what? The guys who work on the stone crab boat, they got to shop at the, at the grocery store. And,
For sure they do.
You got to pay them more to, do that. Yeah, I've really seen it. And then like, obviously like housing here has gone up kind of like it has in Canada too. So everything is like way more expensive. Yeah. And the thing about Canada and groceries is I'm always shocked when I go back. I'm like, this isn't that much cheaper than the Bahamas when I think there. And like I said, we were talking about, right? I'm just like, especially some stuff, because you have that, the stuff with the cheese and dairy, cartel.
Yeah. The dairy
funny,
cartel. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like because I like good cheeses, so I get Brie, buffalo mozzarella or something, and I'm like, it's like the same price in the Bahamas as it is in Canada because of all the duties. Because like if I buy buffalo mozzarella, I want the stuff from Italy. I'm not getting the stuff from all right. You want the real stuff. So yeah, it's just crazy how expensive things have gotten. The only thing I found really cheap in Canada was, and I love oysters, were the oysters. So hey,
did you see? Did you see?
I think groceries are good because you can't hide that, right? You can't.
No.
You can hide it. You can fudge the numbers and whatever the inflation numbers. But when you go to the store and it's like, oh, you're talking about those ribeyes. I remember paying $20 for those ribeyes 15 years ago. Now they're 50. You can't hide that. Yeah.
It's crazy. Okay, so let's segue into Alberta independence because we need to talk about that. Being a former or still at heart Canadian, you and I've discussed independence before, but we are closer now, David, than ever. I don't know how much you've been paying attention, but we've now got the go ahead to start a petition. So the petition will I think the launch is January 12th, and we have 3 months to then gather. I think it's something like 207, maybe it's 107. It's 177,000 signatures is what we need, physical signatures. The petition, once we have the number on the petition, then that triggers our government, the one currently in power, UCP, to then call a referendum, and we're looking at possibly October 2026 for a referendum. So I don't know if you knew all that, but we are so much closer to this. And, obviously when we're talking about food prices, that's just one of the things that, is on our list of why we want to create a sovereign nation.
Also, too, is like I really believe that the economy in Canada is probably in a recession, and the U.S. I think is entering one. And I know the growth numbers don't really mean anything. That's like a rear view mirror thing.
Yeah.
And you're seeing the unemployment rate in the States tick up. You're seeing jobless claims tick up. You're seeing, I think, the tariffs are going to cause more inflation, et cetera. But anyway, forget the States for a second. So if you get that, but where I think it's important is that if you get some kind of downturn, because the stock market is a bubble. Like if you take it's called market cap to GDP, that takes market cap divided by the size of the economy. It's the highest level ever in the United States, right? Higher than the dot-com bubble, higher than it was right after COVID when there was that big stock market boom into 2021. So it's the highest ever. So if you get this downturn, and of course that would trickle into Canada, that would even help that cause even more. And if they still keep getting people to cross over, to the Liberals, and Carney gets a majority, I would think that's going to piss off people even more because you're circumventing, democracy in a way, right?
Yeah.
He's
for sure it is.
Sweetheart deals. And don't get me wrong, politics is animalistic, right? So I kind of get why he's doing that, and I blame a lot of it on Poilievre because I think he's somewhat lost control of the party. I don't think he should ever run again. I think when you lose your seat, it's over. You're gone, buddy. Go do something else.
I just don't think I don't think he has the balls that we need. Like we really need a Javier Milei in Canada,
And
but
by the way,
we don't have anybody even close to that.
it's kind of like Farage now taking over in the UK.
Yeah.
Because the Conservatives in the UK are very similar to Conservatives in Canada, right? And there's a very nationalistic party rising the polls in Australia as well. It's like, here's the thing. Why stop acting like fake conservatives? Stop taking that middle of the road, because it's not working. You're not getting elected doing it. So you might as well take, I don't want to call it extreme view because that's a bad word, but you might as well take a more conservative, hardcore conservative view. Say you're going to cut spending a lot. You're going to cut taxes a lot. And it's not going to hurt you in the polls, right? Because probably that 40% that's what they really want. I know my dad, he's a judge. You can't talk politically, but I'm a libertarian because my dad was kind of like a libertarian. He was actually in the Mike Harris government too for a few years, and he wanted to cut more, right? So like my dad, all he ever does, because he's a judge, just complains about the amount of income tax that he has to pay, right?
Right.
So it's like he doesn't care about Paul Revere. He's like, Paul Revere's plan will save me like $900 a year. I pay north of $150,000 a year. Well, I don't care about that. So I think that you, like you said, you need, and Paul Revere is even better than the guys that were before him in terms of being conservative. But you need a real conservative, and Harper was okay, but I just think you need someone who's actually going to change the structure of the economy.
Gold continues to surge to new highs as stocks fall. The threat of a global trade war is here, and you need to protect your savings. Stop trying to time the market and start buying today. NuggetStacker.com.
Because people don't realize in the 1960s and 50s, before Canada, had this big welfare state, right? It was more capitalistic in the U.S. The taxes were lower. The economy was freer. There was less regulations. John Templeton, who moved to the Bahamas, is kind of one of my mentor. Actually, the Profit from Pessimism kind of thing comes from him. He incorporated, when he still lived in the States, he incorporated his company in Toronto, because corporate taxes in like the early 60s were way lower in Canada than they were in the United States.
Oh,
right?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So people don't realize these things, that it was kind of a more conservative society than the US. And you were paying lower taxes. And that's why the dollar was a par until the mid 60s and Mr. Trudeau taking over, the first Trudeau. Right. But anyhow, if you want to put that up now, look at Alberta's not the panacea. Like I was just looking today, you guys have a $5 billion deficit this year and, $85 billion in debt, which is lower per capita than most of the other provinces. But the problem is, again, that comes the welfare state and that sort of thing. But still,
those numbers that you're talking about, we have to temper that with part of the reason that we want out is that we've been under the boot, the restrictions that we've had. Obviously, businesses have left Alberta because they once had the ability to create, to produce, to utilize the resources, but there's so many restrictions in place. Why would you want to do business in Canada anymore?
Well, yeah, that's exactly it. And it's like, I don't know if I don't know if you ever watch these kind of things, but I watch a lot of travel vlogs, right? This guy named Nick Johnson, he'll go to a lot of like the shady areas of like ghettos in the States, of the big cities and stuff. But he did a series recently. He went to Canada. He went to Calgary, he went to Toronto, he went to Ottawa, he went to Montreal. And one of the statements he made, he was like, Canada is almost like a spoiled child, that things have never been rough.
Yeah.
Right. So nothing is going to change until things get really bad. And I agree with that. It's like,
I agree with it 100%.
And it's like, still, I know that crime is higher and things aren't as, there's homeless more, but you still go to Calgary or Toronto or, whatever, Montreal, and there's still way less crime or garbage on the roads or drug addicts on the streets than, say, New York or Chicago or LA,
Detroit,
Detroit, etc. Right. So, and it's still, the cities are pretty clean and all that, especially the affluent and suburbs and all that sort of thing. So it's like, so basically that's why this is happening. That's why you're seeing high taxes, all this socialism. Like my dad told me that, Ford in Ontario, they lost $19 billion on those EV investments, US. So like what's the economy in Ontario, 1/20th, 1/25th,
Yeah.
of the US, that'd be like the US losing 400 or 500 billion on an investment, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it would be like that's a quarter of their deficit. Like there would be like an outrage if that happened. And Canada, people are like, oh, whatever.
Well,
In Ontario,
you're absolutely right. You're
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely right. This is part of our challenge, I guess, of waking people up is that things aren't bad enough in Canada in general. And what we want to do in Alberta is that we realize that this is all happening around us, and we don't have the ability to control. I mean, they've got a new gun control, a new gun buyback program that they're going to come and take away your guns. Uh, that never ends good. We know
Well, like
that.
in Australia, that's their way of dealing with the
Yeah,
terrorist attack, right? So,
for
and
sure.
my dad, I told you he was a prosecutor, and I was a judge. Like, the thing is that's all a waste of time because the Bahamas is pretty strict gun control too, and Nassau has over 100 murders a year. It's like it's the criminals who get guns. It's not the
Well,
law.
they don't care about the law.
Yeah,
They
they
don't
don't care
care
about
about the law.
and by the way, they're not just buying, like rifles that farmers own. They're getting handguns and semi-automatics and all kinds of
Right.
crap like that too, right?
Well, if
So
you're going to break the law, you may as well have a good one,
yeah, of
right?
course. Well, like when all that stuff was going on in Colombia in the 80s with Pablo Escobar, the one issue that police had down there was that his guys were like armed to the teeth, like
Of course.
army. They had machine guns and and whatever. So it's like that. That's part of the problem. And in terms you're talking about, but here's another thing too: is then you won't also have to do all those equalization payments,
Yeah.
right? And then also on a per capita basis, say Saskatchewan joins you, you guys will be producing so much revenue from commodities,
Yes.
and you won't have restrictions on oil and where you can do it. You don't have to deal with the whole native issue, which I won't even get into, right? You will be able to do that, and then and this will segue into another part of it here. You will be producing so much money, you'll probably be able to cut your taxes a great deal, do some stimulus checks maybe in years where there's an overflow because the government will take some royalties or some taxes
Sure.
on it.
Yeah.
That happens in Norway and Alaska and places like that. And what I really believe is the most successful countries, even though the United States is so rich, but are actually the small countries that say have a lot of resources, be it even if they're just human resources. Like Norway is rich because they have a small population now of that oil money, and they reinvest all the oil money, right? Switzerland, right? The banking and just being a highly educated small population.
Yeah.
And I think, like, I'm adamant about this. People, I know a lot of the right-wing Canadians will like Trump, but personally, I don't think Trump is a real conservative either. Like,
No.
him taking interest in companies and doing obviously the protectionism and tariffs, all these sorts of things. And also, I do agree with Trump on the woke stuff and that sort of his policies.
Yeah.
But remember, in 4 years' time or 3 years' time, if there's a bad economic decline, the Democrats might be back in power. And if you're Alberta and Saskatchewan, do you want that? So I just think you're better off being a small country with a lot of resources. Being landlocked. Who cares? Switzerland and Austria are landlocked and they're rich.
Yeah.
Right. That's not going to affect anything, especially because you'll be able to build pipelines or sell easier directly into the States.
Yeah.
And then Manitoba might join, and then you won't be landlocked. Or even though I know they're more socialistic, BC might join because they'll say, well, we're cut off from the rest of the country and these guys are doing well. We might as well join them.
Well, BC has to work with us. I mean, they bring in so much through their ports. Guess what? They have to transport it across Canada. So you want to transport it across Canada, you're going to have to go through Alberta and Saskatchewan. You're going to have to make a deal with our oil because you're going to put stuff across our land, then we're going to have to be able to access your ports. So I don't think it's a big deal.
Well, and also too, like, I think the native thing is a huge issue because I know in terms of mining, Canada is as bad as some third world countries now because
for sure
it's one thing to make a deal with a native.
So many restrictions. Yeah.
You can give them. I have no problem giving the communities a cut of the profits, all that kind of thing, reinvesting in the community. But when it's so laborious now, and Trudeau did this, and such a pain in the ass, and things are going to take years and years to get done, that is a huge detriment to the mining. And one reason, for example, and Newfoundland that, even though we consider Newfoundland to be kind of socialistic or left wing, but the mining industry is really good there. Why? They don't
Yeah.
really have a native community there, so they don't have to make all these
Right.
deals. Just go drill, put your mine in production, and that's it. So I think like then you can get rid of all those like laborist laws, and like we're talking about platinum, palladium, uranium, silver, gold now going through the roof, and at some point oil will join them again. I think
Yeah.
you still need a bust in oil because there's too much supply globally, right?
Mm.
But when oil does join them, you again, Alberta and Saskatchewan, with those small populations, with those pretty educated populations, will be able to be so rich on their own. And you got the monster to the south. You got, the United States of America buying all those resources.
Yeah.
They're going to need a ton of uranium to build nuclear plants to fund AI. The opportunities are boundless. And like you're talking, like Ireland's another one. Ireland doesn't really have resources, but what does Ireland have? They did the low corporate income tax. Everyone incorporates there. And like the GDP per capita in Ireland is way north of 100,000. It's actually much higher than the United States.
Wow.
Yeah. Because of that. So, and I had an Irish company for a while. You only pay 11%, right?
Yeah.
So, and after all, so let's say your company makes 500 grand a year. Well, if your expenses are 250, you're only paying 11 on that 250, right?
Yeah.
So what are you paying? Like 20 grand or 25 grand on 500 grand? You're paying 5% essentially.
Wow.
Right. So like, so I just think, and you could do that in Alberta too. On top of the resources, you could have make kind of a tax haven like to incorporate.
Well, that's one of the things that I think is definitely on the books is making it. It will be attractive to businesses. There's a lot of people that are fearful that we're going to lose business. I think quite the opposite, because we will be obviously business oriented, resource oriented. We'll be research, innovation oriented, and we're going to get rid of all of the green bullshit. We'll throw that out the window because it's a waste. I mean, we won't throw it out because it's a waste, but we'll do it. We'll do it strategically.
I think
because I think you could.
There's a room for everything. There's a room for solar and wind and all that sort of thing, but it's not. But
it doesn't replace. It doesn't replace.
It's too expensive to make it. And look at solar in Canada. The days are too short in the winter, right? And
right now we have minus 25, and guess what? Solar doesn't work and wind doesn't work.
And I know from being from Ontario, look at Vancouver. Vancouver's cloudy half the time. So and obviously solar still works with the clouds because the UV rays are coming through. But,
sure.
But and the Bahamas are expensive. Are the power here is really expensive. They have these old diesel power plants, and we have tons of sun.
Yeah.
So it makes sense, right? Totally. But in Canada, it really makes more sense. Look at why did Ontario for decades have the cheapest energy in the world? They were using hydroelectric, right? Yeah. They have waterfalls. It makes sense, right? So it makes sense in Alberta and Saskatchewan to build nuclear plants and natural gas plants, because that's what you have. You have uranium, you have natural gas. So that makes all the sense in the world. Like I said, if you want to tack on a few solar panels here and there, fine, but it should not be the primary, cost.
Well, it shouldn't be mandated by some other entity, being Ottawa. They shouldn't be telling us what we should be doing. We should have control over that. All right. So
and also the transfer payments are a huge thing too, because
it's way huge. It's way too huge. It's really just a redistribution of wealth. I mean, because they really wanted to crush provinces like Alberta. So.
And just to
Quebec, who has resources.
About your independent life thing here, that last fifth thing is a huge thing. It was interesting. I was at a conference in Nassau at the end of October. So I live in Eleuthera, which is like a smaller island, and the city is Nassau. So all the investment conferences or any conference goes on at the big resorts there. So I was over there, and I actually for the first time. This was interesting because I was kind of ahead of the curve. I moved here 20 years ago, and it was mainly economic reasons. There's taxes, all that sort of thing, right? The baby boomers are going to retire. I'm like, I don't want to pay taxes for all that healthcare and all that stuff. Sorry. And my dad didn't care. He was like, he was the one who ran to me about it. Like, oh, these people are all old and you're going to have to pay for them. So anyhow, when I met this guy from Canada who was now living in Nassau, he said number 5 was a huge factor, was,
On
he's
here?
got kids and he
Yeah.
doesn't want his kids being taught by some, some weirdo teacher like has these weirdo beliefs, believes in like, underage people getting sex changes and stuff like that. And I have
Mutilation,
to say,
child mutilation. No, we don't believe in that.
I have to say that's been a huge thing. Like when I moved, I never even thought about that. I knew there was, affirmative action in Canada, they called it employment equity, right? I knew there was all those sorts of things, but that whole woke agenda is another reason I'm like, oh my God, I'm so happy I moved here, because Bohemians are not woke. Like they're very old school, they're very Christian, like they're not woke at all.
No.
You met the average person here. So if I tell them that kind of stuff, they're like, what? That's a thing.
What do you mean? Yeah.
What do you mean? So, so I think that's a huge thing and I think that's destructive to your culture and your society. And like I said, I'm a libertarian, so I'm not like super conservative socially, right? But the woke agenda has gone way too over the top,
Way too over the top. I completely agree.
And by the way, if you want to, just so you know, it's about noon here, and I'm drinking a glass of wine or some wine, right? What I'm trying to say by this is, woke people are no fun either. You got to watch everything you say. It's like,
I like people's feelings.
People I like Ronnie Dangerfield and Sam Kinison and comics like that. It's like, there's no way those guys could exist today.
We talked about this the last time. The first interview is that comedy is dried up, and you can't be funny because everybody's feelings get hurt.
Yeah, and
maybe that's another benefit that we can put in for Alberta independence is comedy can come back.
So this, this is a really interesting chart you have, because this is what I'm trying to say with the small population, right? Is look how rich Saudi Arabia is, right? Mm-hmm. And they're, you're getting 7,500 there, and Alberta be getting 32,000. So I don't know what it is now. I know oil production in Norway is going down, because the North Sea is starting to run out a bit, right? But just imagine what, like how rich you will be, if you're generating that kind of oil wealth per person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and our plan is, and I'm talking about the Alberta Prosperity Project, because we do actually have. Let me see if I have it here. Discussion piece. I think this is it. The short synopsis. I had this open before. Our plan is to have zero income tax. There might be a purchase tax. So if you're buying groceries, then it's like 5% on top of it, so that it's across the board. Everybody pays the same tax. If you want to buy a bunch of steaks, then you pay 5% tax on it, and it goes to pay for obviously infrastructure and hospital care or whatever the case is. But our plan is to have zero income tax. And anyway, I'm just showing you that quickly here. But this is
for example, like one thing that Puerto Rico does, and Puerto Rico doesn't really have resources in terms of like oil and gas, etc. But they have this thing for Americans where they do like 4% income tax or something. Mm-hmm. So if you domicile in Puerto Rico, you don't pay taxes in the U.S. anymore because and then you pay no capital gain. So a lot of the crypto guys moved down there when crypto started to boom. Actually, a friend of mine who runs a large mining company, he's American. He moved down there. So it's like, like when the U.S., whatever, you're paying 35%. So if you're someone making like tons of money, say like $5 million a year, instead of paying $1.5 million a year in income tax, in Puerto Rico, you're paying $200,000.
Wow.
So
that's a big benefit.
That's a big difference. And of course, Puerto Rico is poor and has infrastructure problems. If you're rich, you're going to be living in a nice place and whatever, and you're going to be pumping a lot of money into the economy. So, and another thing too is if people aren't paying income taxes, these companies won't care about paying a small royalty to the government on their oil and gas tax.
Right.
And it'll be like a couple percent, like 2-3% or something like that,
So one of the things that keeps coming up, obviously the fearmonger, the lying media, they're going to throw everything they can at it. there's a couple of trolls that are living online and obviously trying to throw every brick that they can at the Alberta independence. But one of the big things that they keep talking about is that we're working towards independence so we can join the United States, and it's definitely not the case. This is not our goal to join the massive blob of the United States. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think that's going to be the whole thing, especially with like Orange Man Bad,
Yes.
Canadians out there, and it's going to be like, I would really adamantly like, look, there are advantages of living in the United States in terms of, if you could have a winter home in St. Croix or the U.S.
Sure.
Virgin Islands or Florida or Arizona or wherever, right? But on the other hand, like I said, I think the problem is people have to understand is the United States fiscally is a basket case. Like they're almost worse than Canada.
Yeah.
Like the Doge thing never happened because no one wants to cut spending, right? Yeah. Trump acts like making 300 or 400 billion in tariff taxes is somehow solving all these problems. The deficit is still, I don't know if you saw their first month of the fiscal year in the United States was October. Yeah. Like spending was up like 18% or something year over year. So they're spending like drunken sailors.
Yeah.
And at some point they're going to have debt problems, and it's going to be exacerbated by Trump, in my opinion, because people aren't going to bail them out. People aren't going to be like, oh, they're the reserve currency. We can't have, they're going to be like, dude, you're telling all of us to F off and this and that, and like putting tariffs on us. So deal with it, So, and like I said, at some point, here's the thing. One thing about Europeans and Canadians, they do pay taxes for all these programs.
Yeah.
Americans don't like to pay taxes. Like, I meet Americans all the time here in the Bahamas, and they'll complain about it. And then I'll tell them what the tax rates are like in Canada, and they're like, oh my God. Right. So at one point, something's going to happen though. If they do have a debt crisis, they're going to have European and Canadian style tax rates in the United States. Right. It's going to be 45%. It's going to be starting at $100,000, instead of like 250 or 300 or whatever it is now, because that's one of the ways they're going to have to try to, get that deficit shrunk. Right. So that's the issue you're dealing with. The fiscal side in the United States is, like I said, while we both agree with Trump on the anti-wokeness and all that sort of thing, fiscally, he's a disaster. So that's another reason you don't want to join, because if all of a sudden, like I said, you're a little Switzerland, you're in Austria, you're in Norway, you're this country that essentially is not running up debt or deficits, right? And you have a small population, then you won't have these problems as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I would, but I think people being more adamant about that, because I think one problem with the separation movement is there are people who want to join the states, but I think you need to move it forward as, no, this is going to be like Quebec. This is going to be like our own thing, right?
Yes.
We're going to be our own small country that has a lot of wealth and resources.
Yeah. 100%. Anything else you want to round up that conversation about Alberta independence? What are your thoughts as far as moving
at
forward?
this point, I'm kind of for it, because I said, my biggest argument is always that I think the most successful countries, like I talked about Ireland and bringing those low taxes. I don't know if you've ever seen the old movie, The Commitments. It's a great, funny movie.
I remember. Yeah.
That's when Ireland was still a basket case. And it changed within the next 10 years after that, right? That was kind of like the low. But Ireland, by having an educated population and doing those things with taxes, basically became the richest country in Europe per capita.
Really?
Wow. Monaco. Well, Monaco's kind of part of France. So anyhow, but it's just a tax saving. So I would say small countries that have intellectual or resource capital is what I think are the most prosperous countries. And we talked about Norway and obviously Austria and Switzerland. Austria and Switzerland have been banking centers for thousands of years, right?
Yeah.
So I think that you should look at those kind of countries and you want to kind of replicate them. And I'm not talking what's going about now in Europe, like with Austria. Yeah. I'm just talking about the longer term things that happened hundreds of years ago. And I think that's your key to becoming, very successful and very rich et cetera, right? So,
Yeah.
like, for example, again, the Bahamas, even though there's a lot of issues here, but per capita, it's outside of Bermuda and Caymans, which are really small, is one of the richest countries in the Caribbean, because the same thing, the resource here is the weather, beach, tourism, and it's probably a lot richer here because it's independent and small, right? So,
Yes. Yeah.
So like let's say, in the Caymans is the same way. The Caymans has no resources. What's the
Yes.
Cayman
No
resource?
resources whatsoever. Yeah.
Good weather, and the fact that it's a tax haven. Like that's their resource, right? That's So and the Caymans, and I think the Caymans, like the Bahamas is about 400,000. I think Caymans only 40 or 50,000 people,
Right.
and it's rich, right?
Yeah.
So,
Right.
That's always going to be the case. Like Jamaica is pretty backwards,
Yeah.
And poor, and Jamaica has everything, like in terms of commodities, etc. So it's not always going to be the case, but like I just think you already have the educated portion of the population. Albertans are a lot different. They're kind of like, I didn't want to compare you to anyone else, but you're kind of like the Texas of Canada, and you have, on top of oil and gas, you have the beef industry, you have agriculture. Actually, you in Saskatchewan, both people, actually, few people know this. I guess it's a fun segue to end off. Is that the first Superman movie, the one with Christopher Reeve?
Yeah.
The part in the countryside that was actually shot in southern Saskatchewan.
Right? Oh, okay. Yeah.
So
a lot of it was shot in Calgary, though.
Yeah, a lot of it. Well, I actually thought it was Alberta, but then I was surprised here. It's kind of like a southwestern part of Saskatchewan that's near the Alberta border.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I think some of it was shot in Alberta as well, right? So, anyhow, I just want to say, I think having that small population, the large amount of resources, and remember, then you have more flexibility. By the way, you guys have gold and silver too. It's just, again, with all these restrictions and rules, it's more difficult to mine for it. And by the way, just think of all the data centers and that sort of thing you'll bring with, the excess capacity in a small population of energy from natural gas, et cetera. You can use that to basically fund AI, So you have all these opportunities for sure. And I would think that Alberta per capita and Saskatchewan, if they joined in, that combination would probably be the richest per capita places in Canada, or in North America, in the world, maybe, if they became independent. And by the way, if you ever wanted to get a Southern Island, I know some of these small islands like the Turks and Caicos over the years have always been looking to join other countries. So you could just take in the Turks and Caicos, and then
we joked about that. I know a number of years ago, Canada buying Turks and Caicos.
Oh no, they wanted to join.
Yeah,
I know the first Trudeau, because Turks and Caicos was part of Bahamas. Little history lesson here, and they didn't want to join the Bahamas when the Bahamas became independent. Yeah, and they actually called up Trudeau and said, the first Trudeau said, we would love for you to basically maybe a province. And the idiot, he's an idiot in so many other ways, didn't take them over. It's like, you could have flown to the Turks and Caicos. You could have been in warm weather. You could have been using the Canadian dollar. Yeah. It's English speaking. So it would have been perfect.
That's a great goal. That's a great goal. All right, David, I have one more thing I want to ask of you, just because of your background and your knowledge and your understanding. Do you have a sort of short synopsis of what you see in 2026?
Well, look, we're in such a bubble in the markets. It's always tough to pick the top, but I am seeing signs. Like, for example, I'm not going to bore people with technicals, but the NASDAQ 100 is still about 4 or 5% below its highs of October, even though the rest of the market is, the S&P, Dow are right at the highs. I told you Bitcoin has led the market both in 2018 and 2022 on the downside. In the fourth quarter, Bitcoin is down. So I do believe we are going to see a kind of a pricking of this bubble in the equity markets. And I think at some point that may hit gold and silver, but then when the Fed really has to aggressively cut, they will really turn it on. But I don't know how long that is going to last. And in terms of gold and silver, I remember if we get some kind of recession this year, that will explode the deficits even more. Yeah. And that means even more money printing, even whatever. So I do believe that gold and silver will continue this after whatever consolidation they have. But I do think that 2026 And I don't know if you know, but there's an indicator that shows almost every market decline, if you go back to 1962, has occurred during the midterm year in the markets, right?
Okay.
So that's what this year is. So
Yeah.
I do think we could see that. And look, if this downturn occurs, the political thing, and you get a referendum October, that could be perfect timing, because that could be like almost at the bottom of the downturn, right?
Yeah.
And people will be really pissed off. So I'm kind of neutral to bearish on the stock markets. I have to say, even though I'm a long-term bull, I am a little worried about gold and silver here in the short to intermediate term. So I wouldn't be buying here. That's for sure, right? Wait for corrections, etc. And I'm pretty bearish on the economy. Canada is already not doing that well and probably is in a recession. I do believe the U.S. will enter a recession. It's always impossible to time these things, right? But I do believe we're going to see that. I know that they say don't fight the Fed and etc. But if you go look at it, that third rate cut, the one that just happened, the number of rate cuts going forward has really lessened. And I think the only way you get the Fed aggressively cutting is with a severe downturn. So that's it. I guess I'm kind of negative entering this year on asset markets. But like I said, I do believe we still have a lot to run in gold and silver. And the fact that the junior and small caps, as I mentioned earlier, are not doing much. That's it. By the way, and I do think oil will make a bottom this year. I think oil needs to flush out into the 40s to get rid of. It's not so much the Canadian production, is that those U.S. frackers, they're full of debt. They don't make really any money. So get a bunch of those companies to go bankrupt and take supply off the market, and then oil and gas can turn around.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much for your insight and for having a great conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Now, obviously, people can find you at profitfrompessimism.com, and you're obviously on X under the same banner.
Well, no, my X is just my name, David Skarica.
So, okay. Well, I think. Oh, but you know what? There is a moniker.
Oh no, I have a Profit Pass business site as well.
Yes.
And if you go look at like the followers of that site, I'm one of them. So you can also find my, my private thing. My private site's a little funky because I don't just talk about investments. I'm a big Raiders fan and football fan, so I'll talk about sports and stuff like that as well. So.
Right. Raiders, Leeds, UTD, and old school comedy fan trolls will be blocked. Yeah, that's that guy.
Here's hoping the Raiders tank and they get the first pick. That's what we're hoping for this year. They got 2 games left.
There's no chance, right? So, okay. Well, I appreciate you taking the time, and I hope you have a great new year. And you know what? Before we take off, I wanted to say to you, because we are looking at obviously really, really doing a push towards this independence. If we were to do some sort of a gathering of minds, we would love to reach out to you. And I don't know if you'd be open to that.
I don't know when you would do it, but I think I may be in Ontario. In June.
Okay.
My father is getting a knee replacement. I'm going to help him out, but I could go like. During that time, I could take off for a day or two, right?
Yeah.
So So
if you're in Canada, then we'll hit you up and maybe have you come over and
it's rather easy for me because I actually live I'm from closer to Hamilton.
Okay.
And I can fly out of Hamilton, and there are direct flights from Hamilton to Calgary on WestJet. So I don't have to go to the Pearson or whatever. So
Fantastic.
One thing I'm excited about, last note here, is that Porter Airlines is actually starting a direct flight. Actually started just about a week ago from Hamilton to Nassau. So that is amazing.
Oh, that's exciting for you. That's exciting.
So,
well, I appreciate your time. God bless you. Thank you so much for being here, and thanks for doing what you're doing. The book is also called Mega Returns: Profit from Maximum Pessimism. And David Skarica, I appreciate you taking the time. And if you don't mind sticking around, I'll just say goodbye to the audience, and you and I can catch up. Okay. Thanks very much, everyone. Make sure to get this out to more eyeballs. Send it out to your friends, family, social media. Let's stay sane together. Keep your head on a swivel. And this is Bruce. I'm out of here. Thank you so much for watching Unscrew the News. I appreciate your participation in freedom in Canada. Share this information and help others to wake up. God bless.